This episode is sponsored by Rihanna's SOS. Please, someone help me.
The God of Abraham has abandoned me. Now there is no hope.
And Gurgle Gurgle cast themselves off the tallest mountain in all of Texas. After 10 years of suffering in the movie closet, 10 years of godless nightmares, it would finally come to an end. Death would be their escape from madness. That's right, people, we're talking about the Manger babies, the animals God forgot. But let's remember that at their core, they are an expression of Luann's grief and methods of survival. As she once said, she has used puppets before to express a lot of her problems.
You're pretty good with those.
I used to play with the puppets all the time with the social worker.
That's actually a very unexplored aspect of Luann's character, her horrible, horrible childhood, one that is so dark and sad that the show never once shows us a flashback of her growing up. There's not even a moment of her in, school or anything. That's how you know it was really tough. Can you even picture a 10-year-old Luann? What would she even look like? Hell, we know more about Cotton's childhood than hers.
My mother died sleeping in her apartment. That's right, Hank. I birthed myself, tore myself right out of her uterus.
Considering who her parents are and what they're like, it is both shocking that Luann was able to grow up at all, and that Peggy never once got involved to save her. With how protective she is of Luann, and given what she knows about Leanne and Hoyt, it borders on a plot hole that Peggy would just mind her own business about her niece being abused and or neglected. But thank goodness we're not going down that bumpy road, as we've got some delightful Christian puppetry to get into. Huzzah! And what's especially fun about the Manger babies is that this is something that Luann chose to do on her own, which makes her feel like someone who has her own will and interests, instead of someone who's just being guided by someone else. Luann decided to take a chance, put her talents to the test, and see what kind of reward she could cultivate, because God knows she needs a little self-sufficiency in this story, because she is not getting much encouragement from her family.
Oh, well, do you think I could sell propane?
No. What I'm saying is, you've got to find your own calling.
Maybe Luann is also really into religion because she used it as a coping mechanism growing up. No, there I go speculating again. No, wrong, bad skeleton, don't do that. Let's keep this review light, fun, and without any awfulness.
Luann, I want you to know, if Uncle Hank lets you down, honey, it doesn't mean that the world is a bad place.
Oh, yes, it does. God doesn't care about you.
Golly gee Jilliker, she really does a good drunk voice. I wonder where she learned to do that.
I need a smoke.
But let's just ignore that whole ugly mess, as the episode is opening with Hank and Bobby fixing up their tube TV, preparing for the Super Bowl.
The terrible truth is that America, the best country in the history of the world, no longer makes television sets. If I let this one fall apart, I let a piece of America die.
See, Hank already thinks America's great, and won't hear anything to the contrary. It doesn't need to do it again, even if that old beast of a TV is, at minimum, a good 50 pounds.
Well, couldn't we just buy, a Japanese one?
Bobby, go to your room.
While Bobby is being punished for giving praise to Japanese craftsmanship, poor Luann gets stood up by that brute Buckley, leaving her downcast in perhaps her prettiest dress, quite the look for just going on a little date to the outlet store. It really baffles me why Luann and Buckley are even together. He has about as much interest in her as I do in reviewing any of the Marvelous movies. With how often he leaves her holding the bag and how just non-existent of a character he is, I wish they had ditched him a lot earlier and gotten her with an actually interesting character much sooner. Now this may be something of a hot take, but I actually think that Rad Thibodeaux was actually a better boyfriend to Luann than Buckley was by a lot. Sure, he was an asshole at the end, but, I'll argue that he was, for the most part, actually a pretty patient guy for a majority of the episode. I certainly know that I would have a tough time going out on dates with my girl's cousin always hanging around. Like, sheesh, kid, like I'm making out with your cousin here. Why you bugging me? I'm a little busy. Not that Luann's relationship problems really matter much to Hank. I mean, he's zeroed in. He's clocked in to that super duper bowl and will not be distracted.
Peggy, we're going shopping for the Super Bowl party, not your feminine items. Diet soda?
Thankfully, there's at least one person in this house looking out for her, as Peggy convinces Hank to take her along with him, even though she's acting a little Jesus-y right now.
Why are people so mean, Aunt Peggy? It's been 2,000 years since Jesus was born, but we're still acting like cavemen.
I believe this is the first time that she really shows her faith, and boy are the writers really hammering it in. But, you know, I guess they kind of have to, or else her idea for the Manger babies would have felt a little too random, a little too out of left field, and left us going like, what the fuck? Like, Luann never showed any interest in Christianity before, like, what's going on? I mean, just the way that she runs into the Manger babies is pretty random in and of itself, as Hank spies a garage sale and quickly scoots on over, like he's my own mother, practically sprinting over to those darn things. My goodness.
Hey, how much for the puppets?
You mean it?
Well, if it costs 25 cents to make you smile, it's a bargain.
Interesting. We're starting to see a little bit of a revival of Hank and Luann's friendship, although in a much more like father-daughter capacity rather than the equal footing that we saw in Luann's big breakup. Now, as for the Jesus stuff, I actually really like that they gave this aspect to Luann. The writers tried to make her knowledge of cars like her thing, but, and it really hurts me to say this, they obviously struggled to bring that aspect of her character into focus. I mean, how many times can she realistically just fix a broken car and still have it be interesting? And don't get it twisted, I still wish they had kept that as part of her, like, background information, just something that's sort of there, floating over her character, like, oh, she could do this, but as an actual, like, plot device, I think they wanted to give her something that could be applied to a broader set of situations, rather than just, oh, the car doesn't work, better get Luann in here, you know? This isn't the perfect solution by any means, but I do appreciate that they were willing to experiment with her and allow her to grow in this new and unexpected direction. Plus, her enthusiasm is downright infectious.
What if the barnyard animals who witnessed the miracle birth of the Son of God had a show of their own? Because then the animals are kind of like us. They're just waiting for Jesus to come back. And in the meantime, don't you think they'd have all sorts of crazy adventures?
I can't help but be swept up in her project. It reminds me so much of the various stories and projects that I've worked on, either with friends or in my own time. How often have I felt the same ecstasy of finding a new and exciting idea and wanting to share it with anyone who will listen? Beautifully, Hank also really gets into this, rather than doing what we might expect him to do and just poo-poo the whole thing. No, he not only approves, but actually helps her design her theater set.
You're doing a great job, Luann.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, guys. But if you have any suggestions...
Well,
you better skim that thing.
Might want to spell theater R-E. It's classy that way.
We then cut to her first show, in which she debuts her puppets to a rather catchy little jingle. Even though it is admittedly a little hard to like the Manger babies, I think they're sort of being written to be slightly annoying. It feels like there's this authentic effort there by Luann, not from someone who knows 100% what they're doing. They just sort of have a fun idea, they really want to go with it, and no one's really workshopped it with her, so she's just sort of going with it.
There's Obadiah the donkey. He says, yeah. Hosea the cat, meow, meow. And octopus too, gurgle, gurgle. But let's not forget a very British bird, Sir Reginald Featherbottom III, charmed, I'm sure, governor.
And just to quickly rank the Manger babies, I have to say that Hosea the cat is definitely at the bottom, since I couldn't even remember their name without looking it up. And then above her is Jebediah the donkey, eeyaw, and all that. Then Reginald Featherbottom at the top. Oh, but none of that matters because they're all shit compared to Gurgle Gurgle, easily the greatest of them all. He's the GOAT! The GOAT! Maybe this is why Luann's half-baked plot about the Manger babies sneaking into the movies began to flop, because she didn't leave innocent Gurgle Gurgle out of the scheme, making that beautiful sextopus the only one who can clear his friends' names and free them from being locked in the closet. Well, okay, either that or it took her an hour to write, so she thought it would take an hour to read. Tough to say.
Well, do they get out of the closet?
Sure, I guess.
How?
How do they get out?
And by the way, check out how they managed to make this whole thing feel like a high-stakes event by using that kid's juice cup as a sign of failure. If Luann can't keep his attention, then all that juice goes spilling all over the carpet, which will leave her excommunicated. Thank bouncing baby Jesus that Hank comes to the rescue, demonstrating a quick wit that would make him quite the interesting dungeon master.
I'll save you, Manger babies.
You will?
Yes. 'Cause I'm the assistant manager of this movie theater. I sell popcorn and popcorn accessories.
Perhaps it's just because I have really low expectations for Hank and Luann's interactions ever since that rain gutter carcass that was the Halloween plot, but it is great to see Hank come to her side when she is literally crying in frustration and fear. And speaking of unusually kind acts, Nancy Gribble of all people speaks to Peggy about showing the recording of Luann's show to her boss at the TV station.
You know, Luann really shouldn't waste this kind of talent on church. If you want, I could show her tape to my boss at Channel 84.
Even when she's doing something nice, she has to do it with a snide little insult. It is so funny how the writers never gave Nancy any really positive or kind attributes. It's always just about what she desires or wants.
Oh, Nancy, I'm so glad you finally took my advice and decided to love Dale. And you know what? I don't even mind doing the right thing when it's this much fun.
She's just the friggin' worst. But hey, at least she's useful for moving this story into new and exciting places. With the possibility of having her terrible puppet show put on TV, Luann smartly decides to capitalize on the best part of her last show by giving Hank the role of a lifetime.
My appearance was one night only.
But you gotta do it. Well, who else am I gonna get to play God?
God? Let there be light. And it was good.
Isn't it nice to see Hank embrace something so lighthearted and playful? I'm telling you, man, if he could get over his initial awkwardness, he would make a great D&D player. He's already shown the average amount of creativity needed when he told the Manger babies to try jimmying open the movie theater closet lock with a coat rack. I can just picture him, beer in hand, angrily explaining why Dale's charisma attempt against an owlbear wouldn't work. Dang it, Dale, just 'cause you're a druid doesn't mean you can just sweet-talk your way out of every animal encounter. I don't care if you did name your character after John Redcorn, I'm not going to allow this. It's an animal, and we're not in a Don Bluth movie. But woe is us. Our little role-playing party comes to a screeching halt when Luann tells us that her televised show is going to be happening during, gasp, the Super Bowl.
Can you believe it? They put us on against the highest rated television event of the year because they know we're the one show that can beat it. It's a huge responsibility, but I know I could do it. With God on my side.
That's right, folks. God may not hate the Manger babies, but he does love football even more. And not only is this the stupendous bowl, but Hank is the one hosting this year's party, meaning that the event would be ruined for the rest of his friends if he canceled. I get that Luann really needs him, but these are plans that were set in motion months, if not years ago. As tough as Hank is most of the time, he does have a weak spot for peer pressure and is pretty concerned with how his friends regard him. However, if the first puppet show proved anything, it's that Luann's performance isn't strong enough to be carried on her own. Not that I think that aspect really matters to her much, whether her show succeeds or fails, because it is pretty obvious that this is more about her uncle being there for her, as she has had some pretty rough people in her life and really just needs someone there to care for her as a person. I mean, just listen to how she describes the villain of her show, Joe Sixpack.
And then he borrowed Satan's pickup truck without asking and trashed it, so he got kicked out of hell. And now he roams the earth riding buses and doing evil, like he won't call you on your birthday, and he throws beer bottles at your head.
What? He crashed a truck?
I'm sorry, but who the hell is she talking about here? Her use of you statements makes this whole thing feel like a personal recollection from her life rather than something she made up. But like, who's the one throwing beer bottles at her? Is it Buckley, an unnamed and unseen ex, her mom, her dad, Bobby? Who? See, this is what I mean about the darkness in her life. It's mostly glossed over and ignored, but if we were allowed to dig into her past, I think it would actually be really hard to witness. But hey, awful stuff happening? That's okay with Hank.
Suffering is a part of every religion, Peggy. I mean, look at what the Jews have been through, and you never hear them complaining.
Maybe they should have tried to work that little bit into the Gary episode, as that is a great Arizona joke. Oh, and hey, speaking of cool stuff, look at that. Peggy is wearing her Boggle Boosters jacket from the Boggle episode. Neat. With the Super Bowl now airing and Hank really not feeling any kind of guilt, a certain someone takes action, forcing Hank to confront what he's really doing to Luann.
God is the designated driver tonight. God doesn't care about you. How can you say that? God does care, and he will show it.
This brings us to the bad ending of the Manger Baby's tale, where they accept their godless reality and enter into Joe Sixpack's car.
The God of Abraham has abandoned me. Now there is no hope.
And Gurgle Gurgle cast themselves off the tallest mountain in all of Texas. After 10 years of suffering in the movie closet, 10 years of godless nightmares, it would finally come to an end. Death would be their escape from madness. The fate of Gurgle Gurgle was not as it seemed. God had other plans.
Yes, I have come.
I guess everyone really was at home watching the Super Bowl because the roads were clear enough for Hank to not only make it to the TV station in time, but also get into costume.
Anyone who drinks and drives is a real jackass.
Hey!
It's a fantastic end to the Manger Baby's plot, and I really would have appreciated if this episode had actually ended on this sweet moment, but instead we get a very different kind of ending. In perhaps the most random and pointless cameo ever, Troy Aikman of all people appears out of the fucking ether and gives his approval to the Manger Baby's puppet show.
The Super Bowl's always a blowout. This puppet show, it was a real knuckle-biter.
Oh, my lord, it's Troy Aikman.
What are you doing here, son? Sir?
And I'm sorry, I don't know who scheduled this whole thing, but who the hell puts their big celebrity cameo in the final minute of the show? I get that it's about football, I get he's a football guy, like whatever, but could they have picked a weirder way to work him in? Like, why not just have him like on the TV for a second for like a cool little commercial? That would have been better. I mean, it's just so weird that he would appear there and just be like, this is pretty cool. Huh? Desperate to put some kind of ending on this thing, we then ditch Mr. Aikman's ass in favor for this even stranger bit with Peggy.
I borrowed the batteries for my Game Boy.
When?
Before the Super Bowl.
But if the remote had no batteries, how did I?
Or after the Super Bowl. I don't remember.
Okay, I guess. What? This kind of breaks my brain. I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm practically getting whiplash from how much we're bouncing around here. Like, just end it already. My goodness. It is pretty funny to see how Peggy thinks she's this divine instrument of the Lord, you know, Jesus' love and all that, but it doesn't really do much for me. Talk about yada-yadaing your way into the end. They might as well have had Stan Lee himself pop in for a quick comment on this forget-me-not of an ending. So random.
Some guys were snapping towels in the locker room, so I went to Bible study to get some perspective on it. And I saw a flyer for this puppet show. Sort of a little miracle, I guess.
But yes, that was the Manger Baby's big debut. I'll bet Buckley is really kicking himself for not being here for it. Just imagine the stupid look on his dumb face when he sees what Luann's been up to without him. I'm sorry, but someone as driven and caring as Luann would be the kind of person that you want to stick with as long as you possibly can. Just look at what she's able to do with the right people at her back, encouraging and supporting her ideas. I dare any of y'all to make it onto TV with just the junk you find at your next garage sale. I frickin' dare you.
Uncle Hank, I just realized my octopus only has 6 legs. If I call him a sextopus, do you think I'll offend sensibilities?
But now I hear you ask, Mr. To Death, why did you say in the title of this video that you hated the Manger Babies? Well, Samantha, it's because I hate what they remind me of. Every time I see them, I think of how fundamentally alone Luann was for most of her life. The Manger Babies themselves are fine. I actually enjoy their presence quite a bit, maybe a little bit more than most people even. It just always drags me down a bit when I picture that poor kid, that little Luann left alone with only the social worker's puppets for companions. Not having any friends is truly one of the saddest things that can happen to a child, and when combined with an unhappy home life, it just fills me with an all-consuming sorrow. And that, dear viewers, is why I hate the Manger Babies. Still a great episode though, very funny and memorable. even if the ending isn't.
Oh, Luann, you have thrust your hands into something wonderful this time.
And while we're on the subject of losing one's faith, the next episode will show us how Hank loses one of his fundamental beliefs, that of the divinity of propane and propane accessories.
The stove! It's not propane, it's electric.
No!
Yes.
Well, it better be self-cleaning because I think I'm gonna vomit.
We'll discuss this in a much later episode, but I actually wouldn't have had an issue with them giving Hank a chance to explore other careers like he did with the whole substitute teaching thing. I know he's the propane guy and it's kind of the whole crux of the show, but it could have been a very interesting, perhaps season-long experiment. But that's a spicy conversation for another day. For now, we can say that this episode, titled Meet the Manger Babies, has indeed been reviewed to death. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.
Because you only got 4 more days till the Super Bowl.
Bill, the Super Bowl is in 3 days.
Oh, damn. Oh.